Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to uswapodcast.com. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Retro Wrestling with Gene Jackson. And I just want to say right off the bat, thank you to everybody for the great feedback we've been getting off recent episodes. Thank you to everybody who's reached out to me on social media and has been sharing it. It's much appreciated. And we've been getting a lot of good feedback on our review show. So with that in mind, we're doing another review show today. And one of our more popular recent episodes is when broadcast Bob Anderson joined me, and we talked about some Global Wrestling Federation from 1991. So joining me again today, once again, is my good friend, broadcast Bob Anderson. Bob, how are we doing?
Doing pretty good, Gene. Happy to be back. Going to look at another interesting piece of wrestling from the 90s, going a few years later, but Global was one of my favorites. Like we talked about then. This show I don't remember quite as much, but I do remember its interesting gimmick. So figured we'd take a look at it. This was my idea again, so if people hate it, they can blame me and not you.
Yes. I will, if they come at me with their hate, I will send them towards your Twitter. But
okay.
So no, we're going to be talking about the American Wrestling Federation from 1994, and a lot of you are going to be going, "The hell's the American Wrestling Federation?" I don't remember that. Well, Paul Alperstein, I assume is how you pronounce his name. I don't think it's Steen, but we're going to call it Alperstein because that's how I tend to pronounce that spelling. Paul Alperstein is a guy from Chicago who in 1994 started up this American Wrestling Federation. He played the on-air president of the company, was the role that you saw on television.
Of course he did.
And so his big idea is to get this into syndication. And the gimmick of the promotion, for I guess lack of a better word, was to try to reestablish rules in professional wrestling. And part of that would be through taking on a style similar to the rules of European professional wrestling and, of course, boxing. That's with having 4-minute timed rounds and judges for every match, folks. This ain't just the main events. This isn't just special occasions. Every freaking match, even if it's a squash match, is set up in the format of 4-minute rounds. So before we move too far into this, Bob, going into this, we won't talk about how you felt coming out of it, but going into it, knowing that, what were your feelings and what were your hopes as far as the whole round aspect of this?
I mean, let's look at two different things here. Me now, like I've watched a good bit of World of Sport. I do enjoy that style. I mean, Johnny Saint, Johnny Kidd, all those guys. I mean, I know I just named like the two most popular guys for Americans to watch, but I mean, there's plenty of guys. Like, it's an interesting style. It's fun to watch. The round system worked there. Here, not so much. Now you transport back. Now the episode you were talking about, this did start in 1994. The episode we're watching is from 95.
Right.
With the guys they're using, this didn't work so much. And the British style, they do more than, what is this, 4 rounds, 3 rounds? I forget. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the guys they're using who weren't, I think Chris Adams is the only guy that had probably ever worked this style.
Definitely.
And, with the American style that people are used to, where, babyface comes in, gets a little bit of going, and the heel beats him down, like, it just doesn't work. And especially, like, God, what would I have been in 95? Like 16? Like, I remember seeing a few episodes back then. Like, I didn't catch a lot of this, but it was an interesting concept when you hear about it going in, but ultimately, and since the promotion doesn't exist anymore, ultimately it just didn't work. So, how did you feel about the concept, Gene?
Kind of the same. Like I remember back then, I was like you, I didn't get a chance to see or even hear much about it. I remember reading about it in magazines. And, and you had guys like Chris Adams, Tito Santana, Sergeant Slaughter, Cowboy Bob Orton, Coco Beware, Greg Valentine, Tommy Rich, all these guys who were all big names in their time. By 95, they're all getting long in the tooth, as they say, but still people I was excited at the prospect of still watching. But yeah, then that rounds thing was just kind of like, I don't know. We'll see. Like you said, it suits the British style of wrestling, but especially now in 2024, having been around wrestling and studied wrestling and talked to as many wrestlers as I have, and knowing the psychology of professional wrestling, there really was no hope for this working, least of all in a TV style environment. Right. We're probably going to include a clip at the end of this from a recent podcast I did with Tommy Rich, and he kind of talks about some of the challenges of, like you were saying, a heel trying to get heat and then the round ends, and now we just got to stop that. And so now we got to try to pick that momentum back up, or a babyface in the middle of a comeback, and now the round ends and we just have to stop that. And the crowd's just kind of like, okay. So, yeah, I guess at the time you wanted to try to, from, Alperstein's perspective, you wanted to try to do something different to make you stand out from WCW and the WWF.
Right.
I don't know if this was it.
And again, like I said, if, the British, they'd been working that style for God knows how long at that point, so they were used to it, and they had developed ways to make it work. But these guys, other than, like I said, Chris Adams probably knew, and he has, spoilers here, but he has the best match on this show, not surprisingly.
Yeah.
And so he knew, or at least had some semblance of an idea of how to make this work. And like the rest of these guys, and they're all good workers, even though everyone on this show's past their prime. There's no doubt about that. But they, trying to adapt the style they've been used to working for, some guys 20 years at this point into this format, they did their best, but it just doesn't happen.
So at some point during this, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell was the AWF commissioner, apparently. In this particular instance, as we're going to see, a guy named Mick Karch, who had done announcing for the AWA. You had Terry Taylor as the color commentator, as we'll hear some things from him. I was reading, I've never seen any of this, but I read in later years, Taylor was replaced by Lord Alfred Hayes, which in like 96, which sounds fun to me. I would like to find some of that. Apparently Ken Resnick was around for some of this later on. So it had a longer run than most people realize. But again, we'll work our way through this show, and then we'll kind of recap it at the end as far as how we think the AWF, what chances it had from the word go. But this show opens, and I'm sure most of them did, with a fun little intro, which I want to show the whole thing. Initially, you had requested, hey, let's show Slaughter's part of it. But I feel like this whole little intro montage here really sets the tone for the AWF, and you kind of see what you're in for just from the way it opens. So let's check this out, folks.
Attention! Americans have the freedom of choice, and your choice for professional wrestling should be the American Wrestling Federation.
Warriors.
Catchy theme song. You're going to be singing that the rest of the day. That's going to be like June Ree in my head for the rest of the week. But
that is somehow both terrible and the best thing on the show. I'm not really sure how that happens, but
and it feels very 80s.
Oh yes, that's straight out of 1985, not 1995.
If you pick Sabu out of that clip, you just take that music and that array of wrestlers, and you don't pay too much attention to what they look like to try to guess the age of them. And you just show this man like, hey, when was this? They'd be like, well, clearly it's the 80s.
Right.
Yeah, look at those guys. It's an old WWF show that never made air from the 80s. But it is a weird mix because you see Nails, you see Coco, you see Valentine, and then you see Sabu flipping through a table in the midst of it. You're like, well, who slipped that in there?
ECW was opening with White Zombie, and they were opening with that.
Warriors! Somewhere Paul Heyman was crying.
I do love me some Sergeant Slaughter, but that is quite the opening.
Absolutely. So
before we begin, this show did air on Saturday, April the 8th, 1995. It is the 7th episode of AWF Warriors of Wrestling. And all of tonight's contests were second-round matches in the AWF Heavyweight Title Tournament.
That's right. We were going to crown an AWF Heavyweight Champion, so we're having a tournament. Eventually, we're going to crown Tag Team Champions. There'll be a tournament for that as well. So as we come out of that sweet intro there, we cut to our announcers. We were clearly in front of a green screen, right?
Oh yes.
Let's get a look at these guys here. Now, not the most flattering picture of Mike or Mick Karch, so we'll skip to this one where he's settled down a little bit. But
either way, he looks like he should be about 500 feet away from any public schools. But
most definitely, I mean, look at that. He looks like he needs some serious mental help right there.
Terry Taylor looks like a stooge. Big shock.
He does.
Probably wondering why Dusty never pushed him.
Well, folks, stick around and go watch this whole episode on YouTube, and you'll understand why Dusty never pushed him and why Terry Taylor, color commentator, did not have any life beyond Warriors of Wrestling here in the AWF.
Did you get a shot of that ring apron for me?
Oh yeah, we're getting there.
Okay, because
so there you go.
Like they spent about $12 on that.
I mean, at a glance, it looks like you're looking at a video game. Like, it doesn't even really look.
You know what it really reminds me of? You remember the WWF Hasbro ring?
Yes.
That's what it reminds. Like, if you put that little like station with where the title belt went, like right there next to that logo, that's what it looks like to me.
But in this particular image, it looks like you photoshopped the Hasbro ring in front of a fake background of not real people, and then photoshopped an actual, somewhat of an actual ring announcer into said ring.
Yeah, I would like to tell you that ring announcer Billy Anderson is no relation.
Yes, Billy Anderson, who we've come to know. He was seen quite a bit on the old UWF Fury cast on the Fury Hour. You know, he was I don't remember what, a knight of some sort. I think he was the Black Knight or the Red Knight or something. But he played a couple different mask characters on there. He was a medic that came to carry off one of the Vikings victims one week. And another thing, if you look, there's one dude up there, spotlit up there at the top. If you look right above the ring announcer, I don't know who that guy is, but he's special because he's got a freaking spotlight on him, it looks like. So that's got to be somebody important who's going to come into play later, right? Couldn't be random. So Mick and Terry tell us a little bit about the action we have in store for us today, which includes Gentleman Chris Adams taking on Greg the Hammer Valentine, Coco Beware versus Cowboy Bob Orton, Luscious Tommy Rich with Rico Suave. Stick around for that. Taking on Sergeant Slaughter and Tito Santana. That's right, old El Matador himself, taking on Mr. Hughes. If you switched up some of these wrestlers, it sounds like a 1991 or 2 Coliseum video release with Sean Mooney doing some corny skit. Exactly. Let's smack 'em, whack 'em from Coliseum video. And if only we had Lord Alfred here already to supply the soundtrack for it, it would definitely feel just like a Coliseum video, right?
Unfortunately.
All right, so as Corey Macklin would say on USA, opening bout here today. Gentlemen, Chris Adams.
Before we get there, Chris Adams. Oh, go ahead. You can put up Chris for this.
Okay.
Chris Adams defeated the Warlord in round 1 to advance in this tournament, while his opponent Greg Valentine defeated Jim Powers in the first round.
Well, nothing screams tournament for a heavyweight title like Jim Powers being involved.
Right?
I would love to go back and find what does the kids call it? A banger, the banger between Chris Adams and the Warlord.
I do love me some Chris Adams. I know he was a giant piece of shit, but I'm a big fan of the guy and really do enjoy watching him work.
So take a look at this pair here.
There's the Hammer and Rico.
It's like a couple of random lesbians out on the town in 1992 or something here.
Rico Suave sounds like he should be a good-looking Spanish guy. Instead, we get this guy who looks like he should be like this cousin the Sopranos don't want to talk about.
Exactly. He looks like an extra from a Sopranos parody porn.
Right.
With a very bad wig on. And the way Mick pronounces Suave, it just drives me crazy because we see more of this guy. Spoiler alert. Rico Suave.
Valentine looks like he wants to be there about as much as I wanted to be on the Fury Hour.
It's true, but then again, tell me when you've ever seen Greg Valentine looking happy to be anywhere on the face of planet Earth.
Okay, I'll give you that. My question is, so this match is 3 4-minute rounds, right?
Right.
How's this going to work for Valentine? Because it takes him a half hour just to get warmed up.
And if you don't believe that, Gorilla Monsoon reminded us of that in every Greg Valentine match he ever called in his life. So great Gorilla Monsoon reference there, Bob.
You're welcome.
All right, so let's hear what you dubbed some amazing commentary here from our crack commentary team. Or is it our commentary team on crack? I don't know. You tell us.
Wrestling action. The winner of this contest is going up against the winner of the Bob Orton Jr. Coco Beware matchup. So, I mean, when you think it can't get any better, it does.
Well, if they can get Suave out of the ring, he hugged Greg Valentine 8 or 10 times. Enough is enough.
Get a forklift to get him out.
Oh, they're going to need that. Gentlemen, Chris Adams is certainly ready to go. And now he wants the referee to keep a close eye on Rico Suave.
A closed eye?
Well, certainly.
Can we watch that Global show again for Greg Johnson?
Yeah, I've definitely got an appreciation for Craig Johnson watching this show.
Wow. Well, first of all, can we do what was that? I wrote it down. The winner of this contest is going up against the winner of Bob Orton Jr. and Coco Beware. So, I mean, when you think it can't get any better, it does.
About the most disingenuous statement ever made in history.
Right?
I mean, these guys are so corny. It's so forced. Like at one point, I don't think it's any of the clips we got here, but Terry Taylor makes cracks like, Mick, I would say you're a pain in my neck, but I have a lower opinion of you, Karch. Like, just so cheesy.
No wonder he was the Red Rooster.
Let's take a look at a little bit more of the action here.
Easier to try to pin the Englishman.
The American Wrestling Federation Championship Tournament generating so much publicity from corner to corner across the country.
That was the worst collar and elbow I've ever seen, and I used to work indie shows in West Virginia.
And host the OWF for a year.
Exactly.
So
that was
gotta
like
feel
the worst.
Bad for Adams here. Yes, we can't put it all on poor Adam. I mean, poor Valentine, but
it was just like I don't like this Public Enemy shit they were doing there for a minute.
Tied together.
Oh, Rocco!
Pardon me.
Yeah, we've both got a cough, so you'll have to forgive us on this show, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, that was I just don't like that weird wiggle, and then they got there and he just let go, and Valentine stumbles 6 steps into the turnbuckle. It was a poor. We know what they were going for, but it just looked bad.
between the match and the commentary, this felt, I mean, and you take the two participants, I mean, this could have easily been a WCW worldwide match.
Yeah. And it actually, like, after about halfway through round 1, and then round 2 was fantastic, which I think we have some clips from round 2, which we'll get to. But, like, I don't know, it starts off piss poor, and then it actually gets, I mean, it's not great, but it's certainly the best thing on this show.
Yeah. Which we'll see isn't,
Well, yeah, no, that's not a high praise.
But,
I mean, we're not going to give it Meltzer stars or anything, but
yeah, God forbid. But all right, so let's check out a classic Greg Valentine.
On to round 2.
In round 2, but this is what would Michael Cole say? Vintage Greg Valentine here.
Valentine work on the back of Chris Adams.
Wait a second now. Oh, no!
He baited him right there. He put that foot up there slowly so Valentine would catch it.
The slap sounded good, and down he went. I do appreciate that bump. I always have, and like you said, vintage Greg Valentine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to watch anything from this show, make it this match. I mean, I wouldn't advise you to watch anything from this show, but
we'll get to some good stuff here in a little bit. So, at one point, you referred to it when we were making notes for this show, and I don't know what else you could refer to it, but we have like an Alexandra York knockoff out here in the crowd, and Rico Suave goes over to consult with her. Apparently, I guess maybe this was the difference maker in the match. I don't know. Check this out.
Rico Suave has a phone. We have a lady in red right there. Chris Adams goes right back to the arm.
What is that she has in her hand there that looks like a laptop computer of some type?
Boy, I wish I was a laptop computer sometimes. Oh, to be a floppy disk.
Well, I'm going to start before we get to the bad commentary. If they make Greg Valentine the new computerized man of the 90s, we're watching every episode of this shit. Because that would be fantastic. Just seeing Greg with his, cigar store Indian face with a ponytail and a suit, I'm in.
Although there's not much you can do with Greg like you did with Terrence Thomas and Richard.
Gregory Valentine?
Well, I guess Gregory Valentine would work. The
computerized man of the 90s, come on, that's money right there.
As long as he didn't update his bathrobe, I'm fine with that. Could have get him a new sequin back robe with a laptop on the back or something. I can only assume Rico,
one of those hammers that had like the button where it like does this itself, right?
Electric
power
hammers.
hammer. Yeah, exactly.
I can only assume Rico was calling in to let him know why he hasn't made it in for his shift at Olive Garden yet. So he's like, just one more match. I got one more match I got to manage. I'll be in. I promise. Right. And they're like, these breadsticks aren't going to cook themselves, asshole. Come on. So
it's amore. Come on.
Just Incredible is tired of covering your shift over here.
He's in the bathroom doing more coke. Like, come on.
There's a callback to those Olive Garden rumors of Just Incredible years ago for those that saw those online. But anyway, so we got one more here. I think we may not. That may be all of our clips of this match. I'm not seeing the other clip. I know there's supposed to be one more, but I don't see it because I think that's Bob Orton. So we may have to.
What other notes do I have here? We did get an Adnan El Casey and Mr. Hughes promo yelling about Tito Santana, and it's just as nonsensical as you can imagine when I say we have an Adnan El Casey and Mr. Hughes promo. Oh yeah, we should have one more clip.
I know, and I don't know if I didn't load it or what. Continue to talk about this for a moment, and I will see if I can find it quickly.
Yes, it's Valentine did a really good job working the leg with great selling from Adams. Valentine hooks the figure 4. Oh yeah, this is one where Valentine's doing the figure 4, if you can find it. Then we also have a lovely point in the match where Valentine hits an elbow to the head, which Mick Karch calls a brain buster. Yes. Making me wonder if Todd Pettengill was available.
Clearly, I must have lost the
no worries
the figure 4 clip. So tell us about what we're missing there.
All right, so Valentine, who has shit. Yes, Valentine hooks the figure 4, and he's doing the gimmick where he grabs the ropes. Rico Suave has the referee. Valentine lets go of the ropes. Rico Suave gets down. The referee turns around so Valentine grabs the ropes again so that the referee can come tell him to let go of the ropes.
Right.
Piss poor. Anyway, second round ends. Valentine attacks between the rounds because he's a heel. Adams hits a good pile driver in the third. Then we get the referee's decision because we go to a 4-round draw or whatever the hell. Referee gives it to Chris Adams. Valentine's pissed off. Yeah, so my final words were I have zero issues with a time limit draw, but there's something about what essentially amounts to a 12-minute draw that makes this whole thing feel really stupid.
It does. The rounds adds nothing to it for me.
Right.
Some people may have really dug it. And
the other thing is, I thought they were supposed to have judges, yet the referee makes the decision.
Exactly.
And shouldn't he be doing his job and not trying to figure out the intricacies of who won the match?
Exactly. The referee just arbitrarily picks the winner, which puts heat on the referee if you're not happy with the winner. And for instances, if a heel was to ever get the decision in a controversial fashion, just there's a lot wrong with the execution of this. But we'll keep moving here. Match number 2: Coco Beware versus Cowboy Bob Orton.
Bob Orton defeated Johnny Gunn in the first round of the tournament, who we discussed in the last episode as the man who stole the Patriots gimmick, also known as Salvatore Sincere, who should have been working that gimmick and got managed by Rico Suave, but I guess they didn't think that far ahead. Or maybe it didn't exist yet. But...
And also Chippendale Tom Brandy in Memphis and other places at one time too. He's the birthday.
I assume we will not cover on this show because I'm praying we don't. Coco Beware defeated Nails by disqualification. I'm sure that was a barn burner.
Oh, I'm not a fan of Nails or Kevin Kelly or any carnation of that fucking guy.
Did you get some screenshots of these gentlemen entering the ring?
Yes, I did. Let me move back up here. Oh, and we missed, I'm sorry, there's a shot of Mr. Hughes and Adnan El Casey, in case you want to see what Adnan looked like in 95. And that brings up a point that we're going to see. Let's take a look at Cowboy Bob on his way out. Now, something that stood out to me, because, all right, we've seen Greg the Hammer Valentine. He had Rico Suave. We saw Mr. Hughes pop up in the promo. He had Adnan El Casey. Cowboy Bob Orton comes out here with Sir Oliver Humperdinck. Everybody in the AWF who's a heel has a freaking manager. It's like that's another one of the arbitrary rules that we had to follow or something.
Yeah. I have a question that maybe you can answer, Gene. How does one become an ace cowboy?
Well, it's not easy. It takes a lot of skill and a
lot of regular cowboying.
Yes, you end up injuring your arm and end up with a cast on your arm for a long time if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that Orton injured his arm but still managed to achieve ace cowboy status is quite the feather in his cowboy hat, so to speak. But he pulled it off. So speaking of feathers in his cowboy hat, he's going to hope to get another one out of Frankie's ass here in this match.
Here he comes, the man who misspelled bird on the 8x10 I have of him, despite having been the Birdman for 40 fucking years.
Please tell me it was B-U-R-D.
It's B-R-I-D.
Holy shit. Oh, Brid. The
Yes,
Brid Man.
The Brid Man, Coco Beware.
I'm sure at some point he was probably a bread man when he was supplementing his income. But here you see Frankie has his own perch here in AWF. Used to, the perch would sit at ringside and Coco would carry it out on his hand. Here he's having to tote the whole damn perch out there because we don't have ringside attendants, I guess, that can do shit like this. Coco's got his fancy green and silver jacket on that looks nice. Of course, he's got his MC Hammer pants with the checkered design on one side and you got Frankie on the other. What a look for the Birdman.
It's definitely a high energy look.
No doubt about it. The fact that, I mean, it's one thing for them to put him in those pants for high energy, and then the new, or Owen and Neidhart having to wear them as a new foundation, and then Coco having to adopt it for high energy. But the fact that he continued to wear these pants for several years, he had them on here. He wore them down in Memphis for the USWA.
He did gain a lot of weight, Gene.
Oh, that's true. That is, yeah. If you follow Coco's career, it's very true. So, let's hear some more wonderful commentary.
Oh boy,
Terry Taylor.
This again, Terry. How do you pick this one?
Well, I don't think you can. Every one of these matches has been so close, so tight in the parity. I don't know anybody. Jimmy the Greek is pulling his hair out trying to decide who's going to be the winner. I'm not pulling my hair out. It just makes my roots longer.
Dear God.
Like I said, was Todd Pettengill not available?
Yeah, I mean, Todd Pettengill would be a breath of fresh air compared to Terry Taylor. So corny. I don't know if he. The thing I wonder about is he just spewing this corniness off the top of his head, or did he actually jot some of these lines down and have them ready to go?
Oh, he did.
Which makes it even more unforgivable.
Yeah.
All right, so once the match got going, let's take a look at a little bit of action here and a great sell job from the old East Cowboy himself.
In this very prestigious championship tournament, big headbutt. Wow.
Yeah, I think he hit his head on the bottom turnbuckle. Coco came out of the blocks in a hurry. Good right hand. Because he knows the importance of this match, and he knows how dangerous Orton is if he gets going good. He's trying to break his momentum. Looks like he's going for a bulldog. He nailed it. He sure did.
I honest to God thought I was watching Shawn Michaels wrestling Hogan for a minute. Like, it was that bad.
I was going to say that it is Three Stooges level selling that would make Dick Murdoch roll his eyes and go, all right, tone it down, Bob. Jesus Christ. But yeah, that's another great analogy of Shawn and Hulk Hogan at SummerSlam. Dear God. So
or that clip of the referee bouncing his head off all three ropes. I'm sure you've seen that. Like,
I thought that's what we were doing when I watched this the first time. I go, oh, is this going to be? Orton had seen that back then. I was like, I think I can do it, Daddy.
Mercifully, this match was short. That's about all I can say for it.
Oh, yeah, that is the best we can say for it. Let's take a look at it towards the end here.
Out of the jaw. This is dangerous. If Orton falls, that's a 4-foot fall to the floor.
Takes him by the hair. There's a block.
Kinda.
And into the top turnbuckle. Orton now propels himself over the top. Oh, he ran right into those knees. Right to the midsection.
Bob Mysterio Jr. there with his lucha moves.
I swear I thought he was going to do the Sabu, pull back into the flip over leg drop. I was like, what is Orton about to do? And he just kind of flopped over onto his knees. I do like that Taylor acknowledged when he said, Orton blocks it, and Taylor says, sort of.
Right.
Because he really didn't even sort of block it, but he tried as best he could. I
mean, his whole torso blocked it when it hit the metal bar, I guess. But I can straight up say I was never a fan of Orton, like in WWF, in UWF. I don't know, never could understand the guy. Like when he bled all over Undertaker and tried to give him a hepatitis, or
I wasn't an Orton fan, even though I was a huge Piper fan. But I always thought of Orton being a good worker. Like recently on a WrestleCopia video cast with Ray Russell, we're going through watching old Coliseum videos on his Patreon, and we've started at the best of the WWF Volume 1, and we're up to I think we're doing 5 next. And on it's either Volume 3 or 4, there is a Ricky Steamboat Bob Orton match that I remember all the way back to when I was a kid when I watched it. It just stood out as like when it came on the screen, I was like, oh. But then I somehow got into it, and I remember it being like a really great match. So we rewatched it recently, and it was a good match. It wasn't as good as I remember, but it was a good match. And I just remember always, I guess maybe it was because of that particular match, I just always thought of Bob Orton as being a guy I wasn't a fan of, but I thought of him to be a good worker. But man, when you go back and watch him on shit like the UWF and the AWF and even 89 NWA WCW, I guess he was past his prime at that point. I don't know, or just didn't give a shit. Like, it became the running joke on the UWF show of ours of these falling brainbusters off the second rope. I mean, I remember thinking as a kid, again, not being a fan, but whenever he set somebody up there, because in our day as kids, freaking brainbuster was pretty next level stuff, as far as bumps go. And I'd always look forward to seeing him execute that, superplex. And then by the time UWF rolls around, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, I hope this poor jobber doesn't get killed when he falls off the ropes here awkwardly.
I mean, Ricky Steamboat could carry you to a good match, Gene. No offense, but and then secondly, I don't know. I always preferred Barry Windham's superplex, but
oh yeah, by the time we see the Barry Windham superplex, when we're watching Bob Orton do it in 86 or whatever it was, Barry Windham hadn't pulled it out yet. But by the time the 6'6" dude's doing it, it's like,
right.
Oh.
And again, like you said, if we could get some Bob Orton from the 70s clips, we might have a completely different opinion.
Oh yeah.
Anyhow,
anyway,
I wanted to shit on Bob Orton for a second.
So tell everybody how this wrapped up as far as our tournament, following the tournament goes here.
Orton finishes with a 3/4 quarter Nelson with a leg hook. That was pretty impressive. That I'll give him. I didn't expect it, and it was pretty impressive.
That's what's funny is everything we saw in this match up to that is like eye rolling, and then he pulls that out of his ass, and you're like, where was he hiding that through the whole match? Like,
right. It was some amateur wrestling shit, I guess. I don't know. I guess the best thing I can say about this match was it was good to see Bob's arm healed. So,
yes, finally.
Right.
And me and Ray talked about that on there too, is how Orton wore that cast, and it was such a part of his matches. Like the story of half the matches he would have on the house shows was working that cast, where the babyface was doing arm ringers and shit, arm bars, or he was using it to get the advantage. And then one week it was just gone.
Right.
There was no angle where somebody tore it off, or it's like, if you lose this match, you got to stop wearing the cast. It's just one week it wasn't there anymore. And I think Monsoon probably made like an offhand comment, like, well, I guess that forearm healed up, brain. And I'm sure Bobby made a smart ass remark, and then we moved past it. But
at least Mike Sharp worked that shit till the day he died.
Exactly.
And then
I guarantee you there's a casket somewhere right now that has a skeleton wearing a leather forearm brace on it, because he was all about carrying on that gimmick.
And there's a shower nozzle in it somewhere.
If there's a heaven, Mike Sharp's in the shower right now, because
you got it.
That was his happy place, apparently, by all accounts. So where do we go next, Bob?
Did you know there's an episode of Psych where they actually make mention of, did Mike Sharp take a lot of showers?
What?
Like, it's one of those things where the guy's rattling off, like, I don't know the exact verbiage, but he's like, do Hondas break down a lot? Does this happen? Does this happen? Does Mike Sharp take a lot of showers? And I'm like, that is the most obscure fucking reference in the history of mankind. Like, somebody on this show is a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah, because you're catering to like super duper wrestling nerds. Like, you have to be like the super inside smart mark to even get that. Even if you know who Mike Sharp is just a general wrestling fan.
Right.
You don't know that. That's wild.
Right. Yeah. I always was like, when I heard about that, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? That's amazing. But all right. Well, you want to take a little trip back to 1995 and take a little intermission before we watch our match of the week?
Yeah, let's do. I always feel like that kind of puts us back in the headspace of where these matches were taking place, and maybe it makes us understand some of this a little more. Maybe not some of the things we've seen in these matches. There may not be enough to, but at least this will kind of, like I say, bring us back to the 90s and remind us where we were then.
All right. Well, the number one song on the Billboard Hot 100 was Take a Bow by Madonna, which I don't remember, and I assume you don't either.
I certainly don't.
So we'll move on from that. The number one film was Bad Boys with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith, which we're still getting sequels to all these years later.
Yeah.
So good movie, though. Good movie.
Yeah.
All right. The WWF was coming off WrestleMania 11, which saw Lawrence Taylor defeat Bam Bam Bigelow in the main event. Because, celebrities in wrestling, that's something that'll never catch on, so we don't have to worry about that ever happening again.
Yeah.
Also on the card, Big Daddy Cool Diesel defeated Shawn Michaels. Bret Hart defeated Mr. Bob Backlund in an I Quit match. And The Undertaker defeated King Kong Bundy. A few days after that, they taped the infamous angle of Sid turning on Shawn Michaels with Diesel running in for the save, reuniting the dudes with attitudes. On that same show, Alundra Blaze defeated Bull Nakano for the WWF Women's title, and she was then attacked by the debuting Bertha Faye.
Oh, Bertha Faye.
Interestingly, on the same night as this AWF show aired, down at the Freedom Hall in Johnson City, Tennessee, for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, The Undertaker teamed with Bullet Bob Armstrong and Tracy Smothers to take on D'Lo Brown and the Gangstas. So Undertaker fought New Jack.
Oh my God!
The same night this AWF show aired. I had
if
no
footage
idea.
exists of that anywhere, we're covering that on Patreon. I have a new dream match or holy grail of matches I need to see.
I had no idea in the world that happened, but apparently
Taker, Bob Armstrong, and Tracy Smothers against the Gangsters and D'Lo Brown. Holy shit!
Right. Then, over on WCW Saturday night, if you weren't watching the AWF, we had some fantastic action, including Big Bubba versus Tim Horner, Meng versus Joey Maggs, Brian Pillman versus Lieutenant James Earl Wright, and Jim Duggan versus Sonny Trout.
Oh.
Fortunately, we did get a vignette continuing Bobby Eaton's transformation into Earl Roberts. And we did get a stunning Steve versus Sting main event to offset all that other shit that I just told you about.
Those first couple of matches sound like they could have happened on a Smoky Mountain card at the time.
Right. Then we also had a very infamous night in the ECW arena the night this show aired, as they had been promoting the first ever three-way tag team title match between the Public Enemy, Chris Benoit and Dean Malenko, and Taz and Sabu for quite some time. And then Sabu no-showed the event to work for New Japan, which led to Paul Lee coming to the ring, announcing this to the crowd, and publicly firing Sabu. Rick Steiner ended up as the surprise replacement for Sabu, as a replacement for Sabu teaming with Taz, as chants of "fuck Sabu" rang out in the arena all night long. This show also featured the ECW debut of Beulah McGillicuddy, Eddie Guerrero defeating Too Cold Scorpio for the ECW television title, and Axel Rotten defeating Ian Rotten in a hair versus hair match as part of their never-ending feud. After what we saw on that last show, Axel probably should have lost his hair, but it was a little better at this point in time.
Yeah.
Oh, and Public Enemy ended up winning that three-way tag team match, so Sabu being there didn't matter in the first place. And finally, to play off what we learned on the last show, the WWC Universal Champion, to the surprise of absolutely no one, was Carlos Colon. And with that, let's take a commercial break, Gene.
We'll return after these messages.
There's a place where only the strongest dare compete. Who are they? Karate Fighters. You control the action. Dragon Kick versus the Red Ninja. Thunderfoot versus Skull Crusher. You control every punch, every kick. No rules, no referee, no holds barred. Just full contact karate action. The man left standing rules. Yes! Each set comes with 2 karate fighters. Get your hands on the action.
The Once you find yourself in the middle of most sandwich cookies, you'll find there's not so much middle in the middle.
Oi, you're telling me.
But now there's new cookies and cream Dunkaroos. You can make a sandwich cookie with as much frosting as you want in the middle. Because you take special chocolatey cookies and dunk them into creamy white frosting, then put them together for a sandwich cookie that puts you in the middle of a lot of fun. New cookies and cream Dunkaroos. Lots of middle.
Lots of fun.
When it comes to the music of the 90s, anything goes.
Music today is everywhere. No need to label it. If it's good, we'll play it.
That's why we got Living in the 90s. 2.5 hours of the coolest songs on 2 CDs and 2 cassettes.
Check it out.
You can't touch this.
There's only one thing left to say about living in the 90s.
You're unbelievable.
To order, call the number on your screen or send check or money order. 2 CDs, $26.99. 2 cassettes, $21.99. Rush delivery available. Living in the 90s is not sold in stores.
I'm looking forward to this one, Bob.
This should be quite the contest. Oh, it's Rico Suave again.
Rico Suave went back and looks like he put his members only jacket on or something there. And
what is Tommy Rich doing?
This isn't just Tommy Rich. This isn't Wildfire Tommy Rich, Bob. This is Luscious Tommy Rich.
Of course it is.
I feel like Buddy Landell went to his closet and found out he was missing a robe after Tommy stayed over.
Did somebody say something about lusciousing up? I don't know.
Hey, buddy, let me get one of them flare robes you got. But he's like, don't mess it up.
I swear, man, I won't.
No, man, I'm good. So, yeah, man, Tommy Rich here, the biggest baby face of Georgia Championship Wrestling in the 80s, the first major star to come out of the cable television era. And by 95, he is here working heel as Luscious Tommy Rich. Look at Sergeant Slaughter passing out American flags.
Now, Sergeant Slaughter is a guy that I absolutely adore. Not that sounds terrible. Like, he is one of the most underrated wrestlers, in my opinion, because most people think of his 90s run, the Iraqi run, the atomic.
I was never an Iraqi sympathizer. Here, have a flag. I was never an Iraqi sympathizer. Here, have a flag. I was never an Iraqi sympathizer. Here, have a flag.
They think of the atomic noogie run, and like if you go back and watch Slaughter in the early 80s, he is a fantastic worker.
Oh yeah.
And I just like, I'm sure the people watching this show know that, but I think you ask, people that just watched, like, non-hardcore fans, and they think he's just a crappy brawler, and God, he was so good.
If you only saw him in the AWA or you came along,
Yeah,
a lot of people didn't see him until that heel run in
Right.
WWF. That's a lot of people's first
right.
exposure to Sergeant Slaughter, and then I want my country back, teaming with Nikolai Volkov. It wasn't a good look for him, but
no,
he was a great worker.
Absolutely. Yeah, that early 80s, like, he is so freaking good. Like, he's probably in my all-time top 10 favorite wrestlers.
And this is such a great, one of the great gimmicks in professional wrestling of all time. And, he come up in an era where if you went and did interviews, you always kayfabed, you always stayed in character. And this shit a few years back where people were trying to claim stolen valor and, he was in interviews talking about, he was in wars. Like, because that's what you did.
Exactly.
But nobody's going to, hang Jack Nicholson because he played a military character or whatever. But, actors didn't stay in character in interviews, but wrestlers did.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody's mad at Tony Atlas because he wasn't really a person from the jungle when he was Saba Simba.
Wasn't he? But anyway.
Gene. Yeah, that, I don't. that whole thing was stupid. Like, and from all accounts, he's a really good dude. Like, why are you getting mad at Sergeant Slaughter? He's an old man. Leave him alone.
Exactly. And he was a hero. I mean, like, to me, I initially remember him as a character on G.I. Joe more than I remember his wrestling character initially.
Right.
Because I didn't see a lot of the early wrestling stuff. So I just knew when he popped up on G.I. Joe, I'm like, oh, shit, that's a real dude. I've seen that guy on a wrestling show before. So it was crazy to me to see a G.I. Joe character that I knew was a real person that existed. And,
yeah, I mean, and I mean, all the good he did, like going around talking to kids and shit in the 80s, like, give the guy a break.
Tooling around that camouflage Cadillac. I mean,
I mean, better than Lex's bus.
True. So Tommy Rich here. Most folks know that I currently do a weekly podcast with him and Dangerous Doug Gilbert, and I'm getting to know Tommy pretty well now. And man, he has so many stories. I mean, he had such a big career, ranging from defeating Harley Race for the NWA World Title back when it really was a world title and it really meant something for Harley to put you over, and all the way up to the Big Don in ECW, which is just really fun. Like I told Tommy and Doug, like, my new mission in life is to get an Italian flag with Tommy's face airbrushed on it, like the one he carried in ECW. And Doug's like, we're going to make that happen. So I'm hoping they do, because I really want one of those hung on the wall behind me when we do these podcasts.
If they can get two, I'd love to have one.
Exactly.
All right, Slaughter working over Tommy here. And we knew going in that this match was going to be basic as hell, folks, but we love both of these guys, so.
Exactly. I mean, this is when I saw this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode, because I'm like, all right, I knew you were a big fan of Slaughter. I'm a big fan of Tommy. Perfect storm here, and they put a little time in too, so it gives us some time to talk about some other things, like the fact that Tommy confirmed when I talked to him on the podcast. These aren't fans who heard that, oh, hey, the AWF's in town. Let's go buy a ticket. I want to see some wrestling. Alperstein recruited, like, these people were, in some cases, paid to come to the show, but at the very least, they were wrangled to the show, given, like, there was like a buffet. They all got fed. They all got prompted in how to react to things. Like, this wasn't just a normal wrestling crowd. And that's why when you look at them, they're all just kind of sitting there dumbfounded. And that's why they had to sweeten the audio. This thing we didn't touch on this at all yet, but watching this, if you go back and watch this whole episode, folks, and it's on the YouTube, the audio sounds so unnatural, because there's times where the fans are just clearly sitting there not doing anything. These flags were a good idea, and you hear like massive cheers or massive boos through the speakers that does not match up with what anybody's doing on the screen. Did you notice that?
So it's a WCW Disney taping?
Yes, but perhaps even worse to some degree.
No, there's a few times where you can see the fans genuinely got into it, but for the most part, yeah, they're sitting on their hands and they have no idea what's going on. And yeah, like you said, it looks like some of the later, like the COVID Raw tapings, like the
look of the show, the look of the fans, and the reaction of the fans. It feels like that Secrets of Pro Wrestling special that NBC did.
There's that classic. I love that Slaughter bump. For a guy his size to take that bump, it's nuts.
And in 95, at his age.
Right. And he kept doing it till, I think, hell, he was doing, I mean, the one in the 92 Rumble was the nastiest one I ever saw him take.
Oh, I know. But I want to say, didn't he do it in those matches with Triple H?
I feel like he did.
Like 97, 8 in there?
I feel like he did. I was going to say
I felt bad for him. I was like, dude, don't do that. What are you doing? Tommy with a bionic elbow there to the Sarge.
I'm just surprised neither of these guys is bleeding yet.
They had to have been instructed not to.
Right?
We interviewed Jerry Briscoe recently, and he was telling him about an incident in a parking lot where Michael Hayes dared him to hit Tommy with a car. They were all drunk. And Briscoe hits Tommy with a car, and it describes it just like the Lawler and Eddie Gilbert hit and run in Memphis. Like Tommy goes across the hood, busts the windshield, and rolls off the top of the car. And once he tells that, I go, well, Jerry, I think the main thing people want to know, did Tommy gig? And Briscoe's like, he didn't have to. He was bleeding from all the gravel. But yeah, Tommy was known to be one of the biggest bleeders in wrestling, and Lord knows Sarge had his fair share too, man. Go back and watch them boot camp matches with Pat Patterson, Iron Sheik, for WWF, especially of the time, man. It was just some of the bloodiest brawls, and it looked like something you would have seen in Memphis.
Absolutely.
Bless his heart, Slaughter's letting that patch of hair in the front stay on, and I feel that, because if I grow my hair out, I've got that same patch in almost the same spot, which is the closest I'll ever be to being Sergeant Slaughter.
Here we were talking about heel trying to get heat, and did the round end? I don't even know what's happening.
I don't know. I know I saw the timer come up a minute ago, but I don't think they made a big deal. Like, we certainly didn't get a rest period in between.
Oh, there goes the ref.
He's reaching into his britches, it looked like. He's got a chain. No, he didn't get anything. Oh.
Sometimes you just have to root around in your pants. Did I say that live?
We can edit that in. Okay. Whoa.
Oh, the Cobra clutch is on.
Rico Suave better do something. Tommy's waving like, come on, asshole. What are you waiting for?
Oh.
You may be surprised to learn Rico Suave was never a wrestler, Bob. He was just naturally that good.
Fantastic. Oh. I didn't see that coming at all.
Not at all. Well played. Tommy revealed that, to no one's surprise, Rico Suave was just some friend of Alperstein's that always wanted to be involved in wrestling, and once he started a promotion, he got to be a heel manager.
The Money Mark had a friend that wanted to be in the business?
It's a story you haven't heard before, but this was one of those rare instances.
Turn the podcast off. I got to soak this in.
So Over the Top was disqualification in the AWF. Tommy was running to get away from Slaughter, jumped over the top rope. Referee sees him come over, thinks Sarge threw him out, and we got a DQ.
Well, that's an almost creative finish.
Right? I was pleased with it.
Huh.
Slaughter's pissed.
Sarge's animated telling of the story is pretty good. All right, that's pretty well done. I'll give it to him. This could only be better if there was a Tommy promo afterwards where he's laughing about it.
I know. I got you, Slaughter, you son of a bitch.
Have you done your Tommy impression for Tommy yet?
I haven't. I don't know how he's going to feel about that. I don't know. We hadn't got that. We hadn't got there yet. We're buddies now, but I don't know. I don't know if we're that close. I don't know if he's ready for that yet. So
okay.
Hey, it's Bob Smith, and guess what? The Outdated Wrestling Hour is now part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. But hey, no fear, you're still going to hear the unique guests, comedy, music, authors, journalists, funny people. Who knows who's going to end up on the Outdated Wrestling Hour? Remember, it's all new and all old. So check it out in the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and wherever you get your podcasts. Listen if you know what's good for you.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday at noon, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school, but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jared, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all. And all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
Well, folks, there you have it. That is luscious Tommy Rich going over Sergeant Slaughter.
That's right. Progressing into the tournament here towards the championship. And, I really didn't know how. I really expected Slaughter to move forward in the tournament, didn't you?
I thought so. I didn't look ahead until afterwards to see who won the tournament. So, yeah, I thought Slaughter would be the initial champion, but I was incorrect.
Well, speaking of, our next match features...
Go ahead and show it.
All right.
Let me screenshots of that one.
Get to the screenshots here
right.
of, where'd they go? All right. Making his way down. Mr.
Hughes, who defeated the Superfly in round 1. Not Jimmy Snuka? No. I actually had to do some research here. I'm pretty certain it's Tama from the Islanders.
Okay.
It looks like it, but as you know, he got progressively bigger, so I think it's him. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Tama Tonga Kid Samoan Savage, and they're calling him the Superfly.
Okay, well I was going to say that makes sense. It doesn't make sense as far as why you would call him Superfly and why you would steal Jimmy Snuka's name, honestly, but it does make sense that it would be Tama, at least here, and that's in this time frame anyway. So
right,
so interesting.
I'm 99% certain it's him. So
I'm quite sure you're right. So there's here comes Tito, still rocking the El Matador jacket, getting all our use out of that we can.
So leave that up for a minute.
Okay.
So Tito beat Hercules Hernandez in round 1, which I would have much rather seen Mr. Hughes lose in round 1 and got Hercules here, but that's not say. So Tito comes out rocking this El Matador jacket. Did you watch this entrance, Gene?
Yes.
There are girls kissing Tito like he's fucking Kerry Von Erich or Ricky Morton, and I am baffled. Like, they must have paid those girls in the crowd way more than the rest of them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. If you wanted any proof that this crowd was paid and instructed on what to do, there you go.
I mean, like, honest to God, like, it looked like Kerry Von Erich coming out in the Sportatorium. Like, other than, well, he wasn't getting his dick grabbed like Kerry, but, like, they were all over Tito, man. Like, I was like, what the fuck?
I mean, and this guy looks just like the guy that manages Mikasita in Glencoe, where we have dinner at least once a week. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm just saying that's the age range, and nobody's grabbing him and kissing him as he's walking past the tables.
Yeah, I mean, like Ricky Morton would have been jealous if he'd been there. It was that bad. Like,
yeah, the old Cornette line. The Rock and Roll Express got more action on the way to the ring than most wrestlers did after the show, and that's true. I think he flat out said had more sex on the way to the ring than most wrestlers did after the show. But.
I sat with Shane Douglas one night and listened to Ricky Morton tell rat stories, and even Shane Douglas was like, Jesus fucking Christ, Ricky. So, like, believe me, I know. And Tito Santana was getting a lot here. So.
Did Ricky use his famous line about the difference between him and Robert?
6 inches?
No. Ricky said the difference between him and Robert with the rats was Ricky would always walk over and put it in, but Robert had to put it in, then walk over.
He told a good story, but I'll tell you off the air.
All right. Not that either of them would mind, I'm sure, but
I'm sure. But
we'll try to keep it somewhat clean here on the old retro wrestling. So this is our main event, I guess, per se.
For some reason.
So it feels like to me we reversed the I mean, Slaughter and Rich probably should have swapped out with Orton and Coco, but I feel like we should have ended with Adams and Valentine. Had Rich and Slaughter in the same spot, second to last. Started with Tito and Mr. Hughes. And then what was the other match?
Can we throw out a spoiler here?
I suppose we could.
I mean, Tito goes on to win the title, so I suppose that's why he's on last.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, clearly we're trying to give the perception that Tito is the main star here. That's why we're paying women to kiss him and,
right.
And, you know, like you said, put him over like Kerry Von Erich at the Sportatorium. So we're trying to establish, but in my mind, it's like, okay, I can appreciate that and respect that, but give him somebody better to wrestle.
Right. That's what I said. I at least have him smash over Hughes in round 1 and then give him Hercules in round 2.
Yeah.
I think Hercules is a way better worker than Hughes.
I've done some commentary with him, worked some shows with him. Great guy. But in 1995, you know, he's no Hercules Hernandez.
Right. So we start with Hughes doing the big Pearl Harbor job, and then he immediately goes into standard worthless big guy offense number 4. And it's pretty terrible. Then did you catch that we had, so every match we've had like the pop-in interview?
Yes.
This one was Chris Adams, and immediately Terry Taylor goes into like offensive British accent to introduce Chris Adams. Like, that's a good way to get a baby face over. Fucking idiot.
Is there such thing as an offensive British accent?
You know what I'm saying. All right, fine. A bad British accent.
Stereotypical British accent.
Yeah, there. I mean, it wasn't even that. Like I can do a step, but like it was just really bad on purpose.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I mean, I would think that would be the name of the autobiography of Terry Taylor, Really Bad on Purpose, if there was one.
Okay, that's true.
Stories of a Red Rooster or a good title, but
I can't think of Terry Taylor without thinking of Dusty Rhodes' Walkman story these days. So
yeah, that explains so much,
doesn't it?
You know, it really does.
Do I need to tell that in case no one knows?
Yeah, I mean, I hate when I listen to things and people reference stuff as if everybody knows, and a lot of people don't. So yeah, please.
So there's a story where Terry Taylor asked Dusty Rhodes, like when they were both older gentlemen, why Dusty never pushed him. And apparently years earlier, they were on a plane together, and Dusty this was in the 80s, and the Walkman had just come out. So Dusty was sitting there with his Walkman on, and Taylor was apparently near him doing a Dusty impression. And I don't know the exact things he was saying, but he was apparently, oh, look at me, I'm Dusty Rhodes, look at me, blah, 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 and saying bad things about him. And Dusty would go, did you say something? Terry'd be like, no. And then Dusty put his headset back on, and he'd go back into, oh, look at me. Da, 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 da. And so when Terry said, why did you never push me? Dusty just looked at him and said, there wasn't no music playing, baby. And it dawned on Taylor, and that's why he never got a push. So
my Willie Nelson tape had stopped playing 2 minutes earlier, baby.
Yeah. You done fucked up, Rooster. So that's the story, and I think it's fucking hilarious, and I hope it's true. But
It is, and it rings in my head every time I start to do my Tommy Rich impression in front of Tommy Rich, and I'm like, honestly, I think Doug would probably get offended by it more than Tommy would. I think Tommy would think it's funny, but for right now, we're just going to keep it in the old hip pocket because I know there's no chance in hell they're listening to any of these other podcasts I do.
So meanwhile, let's get back to this match: punch, kick, choke, eye gouge. Continue
all the standards.
Repeat. Then we get to the one thing I asked you to clip, I believe.
You ready for it?
Oh, let's show it.
Here we go, folks. Hang on to your hats.
Boom! That's girth, and this guy is focused, he's mean, and he's nasty. And he's a soprano!
All right! Tito managed to roll out of the way instinctively, and now if he can get something going here against the big man from Kansas. Oh,
he hit the referee!
Oh, no! That flying burrito!
Did Hughes pull the referee in the front?
Well, it appeared that way to me, Terry Taylor.
Look at Jesse.
So I'm assuming in the dressing room that night, Bob Orton's like, nobody can oversell like me, Daddy. And Mr. Hughes is like, wait till I do the Ray Traylor spot on the ropes later and watch me sell that. But I don't think that Mick Karts realized that Jesse Ventura used to call Tito's finish the flying burrito as to be derogative as part of his heel shtick, because now he's just calling it that like that's the real name of it.
Fucking moot, right? So then Tito slaps on the sleeper, which is an exciting finish in any year, especially 1995.
If you're not giving him a haircut, we don't want to see it.
All right. And we hold that until the referee wakes up and calls for the disqualification. So that
we didn't wait for the crowd to wake up, though.
Yeah, no. And that was the show. And then we get a rundown of the next round of the tournament, which I didn't bother, unless you recapped it for some reason.
I didn't.
Perfect.
I was pretty over this AWF shit by the time I got to this stage of the video.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was the American Wrestling Federation.
Now, there's something I did make notes of here, because when I told another buddy of mine we were going to be reviewing AWF, he says, oh, the Gordon Scazzari promotion, or the quote-unquote infamous Gordon Scazzari promotion. I said, no, the Alperstein 95 promotion. And I had actually forgotten about this, but I had this on a DVD somewhere that I picked up in tape trading. So AWF 94, 95, 96, not to be confused with AWF in December of 1991, a teenager named Gordon Scazzari used his $100,000 inheritance that he received from his parents dying. Now, that's the narrative that was always out there. Now, years later, Scazzari pops up on the Wrestling Classic message board, and somebody is telling this story in a post. Scazzari himself pops up, or at least who everybody professes to be, Gordon Scazzari, shows up in this post on Wrestling Classics amongst a bunch of wrestling fans. Is like, no, that narrative that Meltzer put out in the dirt sheets was not true. That was money that I made through some kind of investment in some kind of electronics company that vested, blah, blah, blah. All right. So however he got it, this guy got a hold of $100,000 and decided to start another original incarnation of the American Wrestling Federation. He ran a couple shows in December of 92. The first one was a house show in Asbury Park, New Jersey. And the following night, he did a television taping in Lowell, Massachusetts. Now, allegedly, Scazzari wired Eddie Gilbert $5,000 to book the TV taping. Eddie then no-showed, and Dutch Mantell, who had been brought in to do color commentary, ended up running the taping and booking the show. Now, here's where you may remember part of this. Gordon Scazzari is allegedly the promoter who paid Jeff Gaylord to attack Eddie Gilbert in Global over this supposed no-show of Eddie taking this $5,000 and no-showing, and that's who wanted Jeff Gaylord to beat up Eddie Gilbert, which resulted in that famous story of supposedly Jeff sucker punched Eddie in the dressing room at Global. Doug comes in the room, sees it happening, busts a glass Coke bottle across Gaylord's face. Years later, in a interview, I think it might have been with Carino or somebody, or I don't know who it was. I think it was after Carino stopped doing those high spot shoots. But anyway, Gaylord tried to tell this convoluted story that he had went to Eddie and told Eddie what was going on. and they somehow colluded to do a worked fight in the dressing room, and they were going to split the money that this guy was paying Gaylord. And he said that Doug wasn't in on it, and that's why Doug attacked him. But Doug has since shot that down on the podcast and said, no, that's not true. He's like, Eddie wouldn't work with that goof. So I don't know, but on the let's see. So a few years ago, Mike Lano, a lot of people may recognize that name, or Lano, if you will, flew in from California to attend the television taping. He claimed he booked the Lowell show, not Dutch Mantell. This was later disproven by Mike Johnson of PW Insider when he released a VHS copy of the TV taping. He didn't book the show, but Lano was allowed to manage Sabu that night. And I think that's the one where Sabu works Chris Candido, where there's a lot of footage that goes around. It's the one with the little timestamp down at the bottom of the screen. And AWF ran one more show in January of 92. And then, as far as I know, they folded after that. Now, let's take a look at the card for this December 16th, 1991, Lowell, Massachusetts TV taping. Their announcer was Chris Cruz on commentary. Guest ring announcer Angelo Poffo. At TNT, a.k.a. Savio Vega versus Tom Burton. Bob Orton and Barry Horowitz with Ronnie P. Gossett taking on Jeff Gaylord and Sonny Beach.
Oh, my God.
Sweet Stan Lane with Jim Cornette versus Bill Rossi. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff versus Chris Duffy. Here's the match I was just referencing. Sabu along with the Sheik versus Chris Candido. Hercules Ayala versus Freight Train Fulton. Exotic Adrian Street with Miss Linda versus Norman the Lunatic. This would have been just before Global. Check out this tag team. The Junkyard Dog and Pistol Pez Watley versus the Psychopaths, which was a masked Johnny Grunge and a mystery partner. Nobody knows his name. Raging Bull Manny Fernandez versus TNT. The Beastie Boy versus Richie Rich. Whoever the hell that is. Kamala and the Botswana Beast, a.k.a. Giant Kamala 2, Nikolai Volkov and Hillbilly Cousin Luke.
Oh, my God.
Sabu versus Wild Bill Wilcox.
Wait, can we go back to that last match?
Please do.
When fucking Kamala is the best worker in the goddamn match, that is a shit show and a half.
Listen to that again, folks. Kamala and the Botswana Beast, Kamala 2 versus Nikolai Volkov and Hillbilly Cousin Luke. Just picture that team walking to the ring together.
Hi ho! Don't go messing with a
I assume they.
boy.
I was just about to say. I can only assume they're coming out to "Don't Go Messing with a Country Boy," followed by a singing of the Russian national anthem. And the AWF Heavyweight Championship, Paul Orndorff defeated Stan Lane to become the first champion. And
that might be
the
a
only
decent
champion.
match.
Yeah, that's the only one I've seen where I was like, all right. And Sabu and Candido, obviously.
Yeah.
Now listen to this. Iron Mike Sharp, Tom Burton, and Sampson versus Bill Wilcox, Freight Train Fulton, and Chris Candido. Like, what is Candido doing with those guys? Like,
why does Tom Burton sound familiar? Was he one of the Hangmen?
He was Tom Davis of the Dirty Davis Brothers and Global with Mike Davis. And he was a dirty white boy in Memphis with Tony Anthony.
Okay.
After Len Denton went away. And then the last two matches of the taping, you're talking about ending on a high note here. Sonny Beach versus Rocky Raymond. And this is what they say the guy's name is. Sampson versus Harry Knuckles. Harry Knuckles. So no, folks, this was not that. And if you read the match listings for Alperstein's AWF, they at least sound more promising than that. But I'm not going to lie. If I can find, because I used to have the DVD that supposedly had this whole taping on it, because I distinctly remember the Sabu and the Candido match. If I can find footage of this Kamala and Volkov, we will definitely be calling that on Patreon at some point, because that is wrestle crap of the highest regard right there. That is amazing to think that actually happened.
Holy
so
shit.
In the end, looking back at this now, was there ever any hope for this round system thing and this whole presentation really to succeed in wrestling in 1995 being what it was when you put it against some of the things that you listed? Now, circling back to that real quick before you answer, anybody who was watching in 1995, anybody who watches that WrestleMania where The Undertaker wrestles King Kong Bundy should have been at this taping wrestling any of these guys on this show, not at a fucking WrestleMania wrestling The Undertaker. Wow. I still to this day don't know that. I love me some King Kong Bundy, by the way, too. But by 95, he did not need to be on WWF television. He certainly didn't need to be wrestling The Undertaker at a freaking WrestleMania.
Agreed. Had this league not done the rounds shit, had they just been like, hey, look at us, we have a bunch of old guys and we're going to do matches, they could have potentially survived. They had talent that people knew. They had talent that people probably liked. Had they just done a nostalgia federation where they weren't going to overtake WWF or WCW. That was never in the cards. But could they have toured and lived on, hey, come see stars you knew? Probably. The round system, though, was never going to work. It was too... I don't even want to say it was like niche. It was never going to take off. That was never going to happen. It was stupid. Like I said, in England, it works because that's what they know. That's what they're used to. That's how it's done.
Right.
Here it could be a thing like, if like William Regal was like, oh, I only wrestle in rounds matches. And it was like one thing on the show and it was a gimmick for a heel. Sure. Yes. But for every match, never.
Because the British style wasn't a get heat, babyface shine, comeback, like that whole psychology. It was just a contest back and forth. So the rounds broke that up. So it kind of worked. But here... in the format of an American wrestling match, no, it just doesn't jive.
Yeah, like if a William Regal or a Dave Taylor or even a Fit Finlay, like if a British heel used that as especially like Regal with the TV title, oh, I only wrestle in rounds, and he used that as a cheap way to keep the belt.
Mm-hmm.
Great heel thing. But as a full-time thing here, never. No way.
And you could have did a little one-night tournament where you put like Regal, Finlay, and even like a Malenko and a Benoit and those type guys, and they could have made that work with their styles with no problem. But as Tommy Rich and Sergeant Slaughter, it's like putting handcuffs on them.
Right. Yeah, like I said, Chris Adams, like he and Greg Valentine, like their match was the best thing I've ever seen. No, but they made it work. Like it started off a little slow because I think Valentine had to become accustomed. Because I know you don't like Greg Valentine that much, but he's a good worker and he got accustomed to it and made it like, I think if they'd gone even like 4 more rounds, he'd have gotten more into it and made it work, especially with Adams leading him into it. But like you said, you throw 2 guys that have 0 experience with that style in there, like Slaughter and Rich are both great workers, but that's not something they're accustomed to. And I don't think even if they kept doing it, like, you have to have some idea of how to format that.
And man, you give me heel Slaughter against babyface Tommy Rich in Georgia in like 80, 81. That would have been
hell yes,
absolute main event with the crowd losing their minds.
Hell yes.
It's a lot of it's the time frame. And I wouldn't say I dislike Greg Valentine, but so my first exposure to Greg Valentine was as the Dream Team with Brutus Beefcake, at 9 years old. And then I watch him through the Dream Team with Dino Bravo.
Well,
then I see
for anyone.
Singles heel with Jimmy Hart with the freaking shin guard and the feud with Ronnie Garvin. Then I see the ill-fated babyface run, Rhythm and Blues. He seemed to get a little bit of fire back in him for briefly during that time in WCW when Watts was running things. It seemed like a little bit of the old Valentine. But man, when I went back, got into tape trading, and started going back studying older Valentine, like that feud with Tito. Like neither one of those guys was as good in the WWF again as Tito and Valentine was in that Intercontinental title feud. It's like 2 different people. You go back and watch that, You go back and watch like the era of the dog collar match with Piper and, at Starrcade, and he's a completely different wrestler. He bumps, he sells, he's hard hitting beyond just we were watching like I say on this Best of the WWF, we were watching a battle royal from like 82. And I told Ray, I was like, I've seen Valentine work more in this battle royal than I did in 10 years of stuff in the late 80s into the 90s. Like, it gives me a whole new respect for him. And I'll tell you somebody else who I remember the first time I saw Adrian Adonis was adorable Adrian Adonis in late 86. And, and then I saw a little bit of his, biker era stuff. But, man, I've gone back and watched old Adrian Adonis, and I have a completely newfound respect for him. That guy was such a good worker. And the way he took bumps and I couldn't wait we interviewed Briscoe for the Dangerous Conversations. I couldn't wait to ask Jerry Briscoe about when in 84. So in late 84, the Freebirds were supposed to feud with Murdoch and Adonis over the WWF tag team titles. And of course, they get fired straight away. So Jerry Briscoe has told the story that Vince McMahon called because they sell out to Vince, and Vince Black Saturday happens and all that jazz. And the deal was the Briscoes were going to go home, take 6 months to a year off, and then see if they wanted to continue wrestling or if they were officially done and want to retire. They go home for just a few weeks. Vince calls like, hey, we need a top level tag team to work Adrian and Dick Murdoch for the tag titles around the horn. So they come back in and they do that. And I've seen a few of them matches, and I've sought them out, a few more of them recently. Great matches. And Jerry Briscoe had nothing but great things to say about, of course, he loved Murdoch. Everybody does. And he worked around Murdoch a lot, but he really went on and on about how underrated Adonis was and how, impressed that him and his brother Jack were working with him. And so if you're somebody who was in my age bracket or beyond, and you only know adorable Adrian, there's tons of footage out there now. Go on YouTube and search Adrian Adonis, watch some of his stuff, in Southwest and different places. He does not get talked about enough. No. He should be in the freaking Hall of Fame as well,
There you have it, folks. That's what you should take away from this. Don't watch the AWF, but seek out old Adrian Adonis, old Sergeant Slaughter, and old Greg Valentine.
And my good buddy, Tommy Rich.
And Tommy Rich.
And with that,
watch old stuff.
And with that, we will bid you adieu, and we'll be back soon. I've got some other reviews and interviews coming up, but we'll have Bob back before you know it for another review here. He's going to lose his picking privileges if he don't step it up. But but if you don't already, join the Patreon, the Retro Wrestling Archive Patreon. We have a lot of great content on there. And one of the things we do on there is our Ride Along Ringside watch-alongs. And so Bob has talked me into, threatened me, twisted my arm, whatever you want to call it, into watching a Stardom show. And if you don't know what that is, that's Japanese women's wrestling. And I'm not a big fan of women's wrestling. I'm not a big fan of Japanese wrestling. Put the two together, I should hate it, right? Well, we're going to find out. So that's going to be coming up real soon. We're going to record that. I promised Bob I'm going into it with an open mind. I'm not going to come in with any preconceived notions. I'm just going to enjoy it for what it is on the screen in front of me at the time. Plus, we'll have Bob there. He can give me some context on some of these things and kind of fill in some gaps, so to speak, which might not be a great term considering what we're talking about. But anyway.
And I'm only making you watch half a show.
Yeah, so there is that. So we'll see how that goes. So there's a lot of great, what I was going to say is there's a lot of, you can join as a free member, and there's a ton of great content. And then we have a lot of exclusive contents like those watch-alongs and our Hot Mics show where you can hear the before and after of the Retro Wrestling Review, where me and Richard and Josh are talking before and after the show. And if you think we say some questionable shit on the show, you should hear what we say when we think it's not recording. I haven't subjected Bob to that yet, but I don't know that we will, because he doesn't like a lot of things I say on the show. And he certainly won't a lot of the things to say when we technically aren't recording the show to get out into the public, even through Patreon, to small number of people we currently have subscribing. So anything you'd like to say before we wrap this up, Bob?
Nope. I don't know what I'll pick for the next one. We've done the two. I might let you pick the next one. So maybe, as long as it's not UWF.
No. I'm itching. I've been trying to find somebody. There's some Texas Championship Wrestling out there I want to watch. There's some Southwest Championship Wrestling out there I want to watch. And you were actually the first person that came to mind because I know how much you like Texas wrestling. So I feel like if I'm getting a turn to pick, I'm going to pick one of those. We'll check one of those out, and then we'll just maybe at that point we'll just kind of ping pong it back and forth. I'll pick one, you pick one, and we'll just rotate out.
Make sure it has some Almadrill.
We will look for some Almadrill and maybe some Scott Casey as well.
Ooh.
So we'll see. We'll see what we can come up with, folks. And hey, if you like these shows and there's something that you're like, man, I wish they would watch this and review this, hit me up. Even if it's not something I mean, this ain't all about watching stuff that either A, we're a huge fan of and we think's awesome, or B, oh, hey, here's something we can make fun of. It's just stuff that we want to watch and then talk about. As long as it's interesting, as long as it's going to spark some interesting conversation, we're game for anything. So
as long
you can
as
hit me up on social media.
As long as it's not the UWF Fury Hour or post 2004 TNA, we're in.
Well, I think we can stay within those guidelines. Although at some point, somebody, it may not be you, but somebody's going to get on Patreon with me and watch UWF Beach Brawl because it's going to be fun. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to be good to watch, but it's going to be fun content for whoever decides to listen to what we have to say.
That's got Gordy on it, right?
It does. It ends with Bam Bam versus Dr. Death.
I might watch it.
As long Gordy as it's versus
not the
Johnny Ace
TV show.
Hey, here's one that's going to hook you. It's got the Killer Bees versus the Power Twins. Come on. All right, one more that will definitely hook you. And this was a last minute thrown together match for the pay-per-view that I heard. I've heard both complain about in interviews over the years. Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff versus Colonel De Beers.
Oh God. I'm gonna make you watch like multiple Stardom shows.
All right, settle down. All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. Again, check out the Patreon, and we'll be back next week. I believe our next episode should be reviewing a Smoky Mountain Wrestling episode with Tyler Peters, unless we have to rearrange some recording schedules. But that should be next. We got a Smoky Mountain review with Tyler Peters from '94. Got an interview coming up with Izzy High, a.k.a. American Kickboxer from the old IWA Mid-South, KAW, and JCW.
We need to do one of those for the Patreon.
Damn right we do. That may be what we do immediately following Stardom soon. I'm down for that. Although it kind of feels sacrilegious to talk over that commentary. We may do some of this new JCW because the only reason I haven't even tried watching any of that is somebody told me there's no Jay and Shaggy on commentary. And there's no Jay and Shaggy. I have no fucking reason to watch it. But
true enough.
Anyhow. All right. We've been trying to wrap this up for 5 minutes, so I'm just going to abruptly end it right now. Thanks. We'll see you next time.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, Wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.